When the small town of Redwood first heard the sound, no one paid much attention. It came during the early hours of the morning, faint, distant, like a soft hum carried on the wind. Those who were awake shrugged it off as a passing truck, maybe a distant storm rumbling far away. But as the days passed, the hum became louder, growing more persistent, and it always happened at the same time. 3:15 a.m., sharp. At first, the sound was the only thing out of place in the otherwise quiet town. But soon, odd occurrences began to follow. The clocks, every single one in Redwood, stopped at 3:15 a.m. Electrical appliances flickered, phones shut off, and cars refused to start. Yet, come sunrise, everything seemed to return to normal, until the next night, when the sound returned. Maeve, a young woman in her mid-20s, had only recently moved back to Redwood after spending years in the city. She came to care for her ailing grandmother, a stoic woman who'd lived in the town her entire life. It was on Maeve's second night home that she first heard the noise. At exactly 3:15 a.m., she awoke to the strange, low hum. Her alarm clock blinked, the red digits frozen at the same time. Annoyed but not alarmed, she rolled over and forced herself back to sleep. The next morning, her grandmother, who rarely spoke, muttered something over breakfast. "The silence comes in waves." "What do you mean?" Maeve asked, but her grandmother didn't respond. Her eyes were far away, distant. Over the following nights, the hum continued, but then came something else. Silence. Deafening, unnatural silence. It would fall right after the hum, as if the entire world had stopped. No crickets chirped, no wind rustled, not even the creak of the old house could be heard. The silence was thick, oppressive, and Maeve could feel it pressing down on her chest. One evening, Maeve decided to stay up and see for herself what was going on. She brewed coffee, set herself up in the living room, and waited. The clock ticked closer to 3:15 a.m., and then it happened. The hum began, soft at first, but growing steadily louder. Maeve looked at her phone. 3:15. The second hand on the wall clock stopped dead. She strained her ears, trying to pinpoint where the sound was coming from. But it seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It filled the room, vibrating in her bones. And then, silence. Maeve couldn't hear her own heartbeat, her own breath. It was as though the world had been muted. She stood slowly, every movement feeling thick and sluggish. Something was wrong. The air in the room felt heavy, almost like it was suffocating her. She glanced toward the window and noticed something strange. The trees outside weren't moving. No wind. No motion at all. Just as she was about to step closer, a shadow passed by the window. Quick, too quick to be anything human. Startled, she jumped back, her heart pounding in her throat, though she couldn't hear it. In the suffocating silence, someone was out there. The next morning, Maeve visited the local library. She needed answers. The librarian, an elderly woman who had worked there for decades, noticed Maeve's restless demeanor and pulled her aside. "You've heard it, haven't you?" the librarian whispered. "The hum." Maeve nodded. "It's been happening for years, but only some of us can hear it. People disappear, you know. Not often, but once in a while, and they're never found." Maeve's blood ran cold. "What do you mean disappear?" "They vanish, right after the silence comes. Like they never existed at all. No trace. No one remembers them, except us, the ones who hear the hum." That night, Maeve couldn't sleep. Her grandmother's cryptic words echoed in her head. "The silence comes in waves." As 3:15 a.m. approached, Maeve sat by her window, watching the street below. The hum started, just like every night, but this time it felt closer, more insistent. She glanced down the road and saw something terrifying. People, standing perfectly still in the middle of the street. Dozens of them. Their faces were blank, expressionless, their eyes wide open but seeing nothing. Suddenly, the hum stopped. Silence. And then the figures moved. Slowly at first, then faster, darting in all directions. Maeve recoiled in horror. They weren't walking. They were gliding, their feet never touching the ground. One of them, a woman, stopped right outside her window, staring up at her. Her mouth opened, and though Maeve couldn't hear her scream, she could feel it. A deep, primal scream that sent shivers down her spine. The next morning, the streets were empty again. The town carried on as if nothing had happened, but Maeve knew better. She visited the librarian again, desperate for more answers. The woman led her to an old, dusty map of Redwood, dated nearly 100 years ago. Maeve's house, her grandmother's house, wasn't marked on it. "This place," the librarian said, "it wasn't always here. It appears when it wants to." The realization hit Maeve like a freight train. Her house, her family were part of something older, something that didn't belong in this world. The hum wasn't just a sound, it was a warning, a signal of the thinning barrier between their world and something else, something ancient and unspeakable. That night, Maeve packed her bags. She had to leave. But just as she was about to walk out the door, her grandmother stood in her way. "You can't leave, Maeve," she said, her voice eerily calm. "We belong here. We've always belonged here." The hum began again, louder than ever. Maeve's heart raced as she turned to flee, but the silence hit, freezing her in place. Her grandmother smiled, her face distorted, inhuman. Maeve realized too late. The silence wasn't just a byproduct of the hum. It was alive. It had been watching her, waiting for the moment to claim her. And as the world faded into that deafening silence, Maeve finally understood. There was no escape from Redwood. Maeve's vision blurred as the silence pressed against her. The weight of it felt unbearable, a crushing force that threatened to erase her entirely. She tried to scream, to move, but her limbs were frozen in place, her voice swallowed by the void. And then, just as quickly as it had come, the silence lifted. Maeve collapsed to the floor, gasping for air. Her grandmother was gone, the room was still, and everything looked normal again. Except it wasn't. The air felt charged, thick with tension. She scrambled to her feet, heart hammering in her chest, and bolted out of the house into the cool night air. The town was deathly quiet. Not a single light in any of the houses, no movement, no sound. She stood in the middle of the street, looking around wildly, trying to decide where to go. Her mind raced, but one thought kept cutting through the haze. "I need to leave Redwood. Now." But as she turned to make a run for the woods, she saw them again, those figures standing in the road. This time, they were closer. Dozens of them, their faces blank, eyes wide open, staring at her. Maeve's breath caught in her throat as they began to move toward her, gliding silently over the pavement. Panic surged through her veins. She turned and ran, sprinting down the street, past empty houses, through deserted alleyways. But no matter how fast she ran, the figures were always there, just at the edge of her vision, flickering in and out of existence like ghosts. The hum returned, louder than ever, vibrating in her skull. Her legs ached, her lungs burned, but she kept going, desperate to outrun whatever was coming for her. She reached the edge of town and plunged into the woods, branches whipping at her face as she tore through the underbrush. The trees loomed overhead, their twisted shapes casting long, dark shadows across the forest floor. The hum grew louder still, almost unbearable now. Maeve stumbled, fell to her knees, and clutched her head in agony. The silence was coming again. She could feel it, creeping up on her like a predator. She crawled forward, the dirt and leaves clinging to her skin, trying to escape its reach. Suddenly she saw it, a clearing up ahead, a faint light shimmering through the trees. She forced herself to her feet, staggering toward it, hope flaring in her chest. But when she reached the clearing, she froze. In the center of the open space stood an old, weathered structure, a crumbling stone monument of sorts. And there, etched into the stones, was a symbol, a spiral twisting in on itself, the same shape Maeve had seen on the map back at the library. It was the heart of everything, the source. The hum was deafening now, pulsing from the monument, pulling at her, calling her name. She backed away slowly, but her foot caught on something, and she stumbled. When she looked down, her blood ran cold. There, half buried in the dirt, was a hand, a pale, lifeless hand. And next to it, more bodies. Dozens of them, maybe more, all lying in shallow graves, their eyes wide open, staring blankly up at the sky. Before she could scream, the silence fell again. Maeve's vision swam, the world around her twisting and warping. She could feel the figures closing in, could hear their footsteps now, soft and deliberate. They were no longer gliding. They were walking, moving toward her with purpose. As her body began to give in to the crushing silence, Maeve felt something inside her shift. A strange calm settled over her, a realization sinking in. The figures, they weren't strangers. They were people who had disappeared, people the town had forgotten. They had all heard the hum, just like her, and now they were part of it. Maeve's gaze drifted to the spiral on the monument. It wasn't just a symbol. It was a gateway, a mark left by something ancient, something that fed on the silence, on the people who were drawn to it. And it had claimed her, just as it had claimed the others. She closed her eyes, the pressure of the silence overwhelming her. She didn't fight it anymore. There was no point. The town, the hum, the silence, it had been waiting for her. It had always been waiting. When Maeve opened her eyes again, she was no longer in the clearing. She was standing in the middle of Redwood, in the same street where it had all started. The town was exactly as it had been, untouched by time, eerily quiet. And yet, something was different. Maeve's reflection in a nearby window caught her eye. Her face was blank, her eyes wide and unblinking. She turned slowly, watching as her body moved without her will, gliding silently down the street. She was one of them now. The hum began once more, but this time, Maeve didn't fear it. She was part of it, part of the silence. And as the world around her faded again, she understood that there was no end, no escape. Only the hum, the silence, and the endless pull of the spiral.